So I want to welcome you to the Waypoint 55 webinar tonight. And my name is Tim Cole, and I serve with Waypoint Church Partners. And our webinar platform was created about 4 years ago, where we wanted to interface with and resource ministry team leaders within the churches within our region, mostly because there's such a lack of great resourcing out there to help you do what you do for your church and to do it well. And so we provide webinars where we hear from good ministry leaders from around our region and even from around the country for what they're doing at their church that we might learn from. And so that takes the form of, for some months, it's for elders or security teams, safety teams, prayer team leaders, mission team leaders, first impressions team leaders, which will be our webinar next month. But the one that we're talking about this month is about benevolence, about the people in your town that are looking for help from your church, seeking help, and how you have a plan for that proactively, and how you figure out the decisions on what you're going to do with that and for that. And so we're really thankful for our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, that has been the sponsor of our webinar platform since we began 4 years ago. So we've got now more than 50 webinars that we have stocked away that are on our YouTube channel. And so if you go to the YouTube and search for Waypoint Church Partners, you'll find our YouTube channel, and the categories of the different ministry teams that we have had sessions for have been organized into playlists on our YouTube channel. And so if you're elders or if missions team or first impressions, there'll be 3, 4, 5 webinars that would help train you or other people on your team in that particular area. And so as you can imagine, during COVID, our subscriptions for our YouTube channel have quadrupled in the last 18 months. And so you can, when you go onto that, you can hit subscribe and you get notified, and hit the little bell, actually, you get notified when another training video has been posted to the channel. And then you can either watch it or forward the link to it to someone in your church that leads in that area. So on our webinar tonight, we've got Robbie O'Brien and Jeff Chason. Did I say that right, Jeff?
You got it.
Close enough. All right. And they are from Salty Church in Florida. And I met Robbie last month in Colorado at a conference for church planting leaders. And we got to sit at the same round table for the week and got to meet each other. And I heard his story, not only about his church plant, but about the Salty Family Services is their program, their ministry that they have there. And I thought, man, people in our region need to hear this story, and not just the story of what they're doing there, but the principles and the elements that are applicable to any church, or at least to be considered on how you can do this better at your church. So Robbie, welcome tonight. And I'd love for you to tell us just a real quick synopsis of Salty Church and where it came from and what the profile looks like now as we're trying to figure out how to come out of COVID.
Okay. Yeah. So Salty Church, we planted Salty Church 16 years ago, and was given birth there. We're a beach church, and just trying to figure out how to do what God has called us to do as a church along the way, in a very uniquely beach setting, tourism and those kinds of things. As we begin to learn how to do what we were doing, thinking about our identity and thinking about our mission, several keywords just continue to emerge in those early days. Salty was one of them. And I don't know if it's obvious or not, but Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth. And it matches well with the beach and the salty ocean in the Atlantic here. But being salty, I took that very seriously in terms of even the scripture, and that idea of being salty is you're a change agent. Salt changes everything it comes in contact with. And so I think part of what that context was, Jesus was saying, hey, what are you going to do, to have an impact on the world? Let your light shine before men so they may see your good deeds, that kind of thing. And so that really shaped some of our, maybe the visual part of who we are, but also the substance of what we do. And then also too, a couple of key words that just really pushed us to the point of it's really part of our mission statement is to rescue and empower. In fact, our church mission statement is rescue and empower disciples for Jesus. And so that really, it's not just a mission statement, it drives us. Rescue is one thing, but also empower. And so we've been trying to figure out how to best live that out in a lot of ways, discipleship and others. But over the years, as the church unfolded, one of the things my wife and I did, we got involved with foster care and adoption. We were doing that, did a lot of foster care, ended up adopting too. And in that system, really highlighting this idea that the government the government spends a lot of time and energy and money responding to crises that have already occurred. So if you're a drug addict, you're homeless, you lose your kids and all of those things, there are services along the way. But we could all argue about how effective they do, in addressing those things. But ultimately, we were just recognizing that nobody really spends any time with prevention. It's all responding to the crises that have already happened. And then because of our involvement with foster and adoption, I ended up meeting Jeff, and Jeff became a part of our church. And he was working in the community and living in the child welfare world. And he can tell you the story a little bit better, but just being dissatisfied with ineffectiveness of government and all that. He got to talk and had this dream and a vision about starting a ministry to really address the needs. And I just saw the vision for that. And the short story is we brought him in under the umbrella of Salty Church and said, hey, let's run this as a mission for Salty. So because of Jeff, we ended up starting this thing called Salty Family Services. And it's basically the rescue arm, you might say, of Salty Church. I was always driven by the question that was asked years ago. I don't know where I heard it in a conference or something, but somebody said, if your church were to disappear tomorrow, would anybody in your community know or care? And that always just drove me. I'm like, yes, that's that Salty thing. How do we make a difference? And so through Salty Family Services, saying, what can we do to make a difference in our community, to rescue and empower disciples for Jesus along the way, but also do it in a way that's effective. And so we ended up, this ministry has evolved now to the point where we're working specifically to help rescue, and we focus our attention on family and children. And but as a part of that, Salty Family Services, Jeff is our director. They also handle all of the benevolence. So I want to make sure for the audience who's listening, we have a big umbrella, which is Salty Church. And then we have Salty Family Services as the rescue arm within Salty Church, and they handle the benevolence. So benevolence is a subsection of the whole. So sometimes it gets confused maybe about what it is, but maybe people should think about benevolence in terms of all that we do with family services. So either way, we work to rescue, empower, and serve families in such a way that hopefully keeps them from homelessness and from child abuse and from addiction. So if we can get in early and catch the problem before they occur, then they don't need the ineffective government care in response to the problems. So let me stop there, and that probably sets the stage for some things along the way. So
yeah, it is. It's going to give us a real good segue for Jeff to introduce us to just a little bit of his story. I'm curious. I've not had a chance yet to attend Salty Church. Someone asked, so how close are you to the beach? I got to plant a church 24 years ago that was at the beach, but we weren't on the beach. But we had a lot of flip-flops and T-shirts and shorts on stage as well as there. So how close are you to the beach?
Yes. So we do all our baptisms in the ocean. So we just walk across the street. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to walk across the street to get to the ocean. So real close.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jeff, so tell us very quickly kind of your story leading into getting into Salty Church, and then kind of how that was planted and blossomed through Salty, kind of picking up from where Robbie left off.
Well, the interesting part of my story, I think it's relevant to the church world, was I was a non-believer for most of my life. I only turned my life over to Christ 10 years ago. So I had built a career working in child welfare, pretty much, in some capacity or another. So I know no other career. And there's some things that I really learned from it. And a lot of it was what not to do, and maybe some good elements that could be taken with us as well. But one of the things that I always, at least in our community, I think as a non-believer, I really didn't give the church a lot of opportunity. But then again, too, I had this image of why do I need it? Why would I reach out to a church? Because they won't know what to do with this situation. And I didn't see a lot of effectiveness into what I was seeing in the problem in the community. And so when I turned my life over to Christ, and I started, reading the Bible, and I just got to Acts 2, and I'm like, oh my goodness, here it is, like people are sharing, and like my mind was blown. But then as I grew and I started having, as Robbie said, these pressure points at work, I kind of brought this idea to my wife, who so happened to be a project manager. So we just started dreaming, and she started capturing everything and kind of putting it in some kind of a plan. And we were attending Salty Church. That's the church that I was going to. I walked in as a non-believer, as a matter of fact, originally. And, 2.5, maybe 3 years later, we're creating this nonprofit, presenting it to Robbie and his wife. And we didn't really know them. That was my pastor, but we didn't have like a relationship with them necessarily. And like Robbie said, he saw the vision right off the bat. Like we had a synergy there. And eventually over time, he just gave that on-ramp for us to come on board, me and my wife, to do ministry full time.
All right. So tell us about how it took shape kind of immediately from there. Robbie caught the vision. He said, yeah, let's do this. And then which I think there's a lot of power in. It's a couple in the church that I think most churches of any modest size see what some larger churches are doing. They think, oh, we could never do that. But at the end of the day, it's God's people thinking, I need to do something about that. Right. And so that's a great story for you and your wife, Jeff, to say, you know what, we can do something here. So thanks for following God's lead on that. But so tell us what it looked like that first year when you started trying to figure out what can we do.
So that first year, I'll just go with Salty Family Services because we were kind of independent. We were taking shape, doing a little bit of stuff. But that first year with Salty Family Services, it literally was my wife answering the phones to people calling in for help, and me following up with those calls, and really trying to figure out how's the best way we kind of filter through the need. We weren't getting a huge volume of calls, but we were small. Like this arm of Salty Church, Salty Family Services, was just starting to grow. We had a couple of volunteers. But one of the things that we implemented right from the start was, if we were going to help anybody financially, there had to be a relationship component along with it that had nothing to do with church. And there didn't need to be, you have to come to a service. You have to, we didn't even want people to come to our site and sit and meet. Our concept was, we'll do a process, and I could talk about, as this evolved in our assessment, but initially it was getting people that wanted to be empowered, that word empowered, just identifying some key things that were just like beyond just the financial need. And I always would tell people on the phone, and still do, be intellectually curious about the person's story, be really like curious and like follow-up questions, and not just take everything, face value and go, okay, and just take down information. But we're really looking for that person that really wanted that change, that were desperate, were scared and weren't sure what to do, didn't know where to turn. And we would partner them with a mentor. So we would have a trained person that we called mentors that would go out to the home. And it would have to be a person that was definitely had a very good relationship with Jesus, had to, just couldn't rely on, I just go to church once a week, and, you're representing the church. You're gonna walk into someone's home, and you might have some unchurched, de-churched people that are gonna have questions. And so there are some.
Jeff, let's back up just a second, because I think it may be important for anybody who's watching to understand the idea of benevolence in terms of what is that. Because I remember working prior to us doing what we do. I think of benevolence is, I've got $200 a month I can spend. People call in, they need something. How do I divvy up the $200 to help the person? That's typically, I think anyways, how I saw benevolence. So I've got X amount of money. I got these many calls. How do I decide where the money goes? But I think early on, we learned that that's not the point, because there's a massive difference between just giving somebody a substance, whether it's let's say it's a $20 gift card or something, or a grocery card or whatever. It's easy to think about how to give that out. The harder part is, how are we going to enable, or are we going to enable people, or are we going to help empower people? So our shift was not about how to hand out a dollar amount. It's about how to actually help the people who are calling.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the big difference here is, are we in the ministry of making people feel better from the moment, or are we in the business of life change? And so the empower word has been our guardrails. We're going to refuse to enable people. If all you want is a handout, the need is infinite. We'll never have enough money for people who just want the handout. So to be able to discern the difference between those who want just a handout or those who are wanting help. If somebody's wanting help, we want to discern that, and then we want to be able to speak into that. And that's where things shift. That's the discernment piece, is how do we know when to empower? And then we're going to spend our time, money, and energy on that. For those who just want enablement, that's a big point of discernment of when we get to say no. Is so I think we might have to spend a little bit of time in there before we get into like the mentoring
Yeah,
part.
absolutely. And part of that first year, we didn't have a lot of those elements really well fine-tuned yet, because we were so small. And the discernment was my wife taking the information, giving it over to me, and me just having just experience and working with people and saying yes or no ultimately. And we started to realize this is not the discernment that we want. That's not the way we want to continue this path. So that's when we started really looking at, and especially as we started to grow in more volume and become more recognized for Salty Church helps people. So you start getting more volume, and we have to know too, we don't provide a lot of financial assistance. There's a lot more organizations that provide a lot more money. So it's not even a dollar amount. It really is, to what Robbie was saying, it's that empowerment and walking through life with people. But when people were calling in, we started to get more and more traction. My wife actually took a step out of the front desk and started getting volunteers, so that even to this day, the front desk, the people that are receiving the calls, is nothing but volunteers. So that first point of contact is just really trying to connect with a person relationally while gathering information that we need. So every touch that we have with somebody, there has to be a relationship that we're trying to foster and build off of. So the basic information that we're gathering is just the bare necessities of, do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Because those are two separate pockets right off the bat. How do we look at those situations? And then from there, where are you living? Do you have a place to live? Are you in a hotel? Are you in a car? How many children do you have? If you have kids, are you employed? Just bare basic stuff. And then
so I think at that point, at that point, I think for people to understand, it might be helpful that might be how our vocabulary shifts, where because the need is infinite, is literally nonstop, right? Jeff, how many calls we get in a month? People asking for help. It's 100 and
last
something.
month was 189.
189 calls per month. Wow. People, I need help. And so you'll never have enough money. If that's all you're gonna do, you'll never have enough money. And so for what we had to do is decide how we're gonna, so empowerment helps us to make a decision. But secondly, we also said, if you got kids, you go higher on the list. So is it true, Jeff, that I would say that if you don't have children, we would consider that more a benevolence track?
Absolutely.
And then if you do have kids, then that's where the family services part kind of kicks in.
Absolutely.
So it's two different tracks, because we had to decide where are we going to invest the bulk of our money. If you've got kids, we think that's deserving. The benevolence part would be lower impact, low requirement, lower relationship, and it's more just helping through. So if you want to be enabled, you're at the bottom of the list. If you got kids, you're at the top of the list. So hopefully that helps maybe unpack this for people who just don't know what we've been doing.
Yeah, no, that helps give a lot of context. I think, and I don't know if you have to practice this with the people that you volunteer with, but just to tell someone, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Because most churches can't say that statement. How, from a real practical standpoint, how do you say that once you've talked to someone and they don't want help, they just want some money? How do you handle that?
Yes, let's answer that, Jeff. What I've said as Jeff's supervisor is I don't like telling anybody no. So we try to say yes, but sometimes that yes is here's 3 phone numbers to call. So Jeff, talk about that in terms of yes or no, and how we give a couple of examples of how we might hand people off without giving them actually direct aid.
Yeah, so we're always, and that has been top down kind of continuing talking and teaching of, we're not saying no. You don't feel like we don't have to handle everything. We can't handle everything. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a no, so to speak, but with here's some opportunities for you, and try to really present that opportunity. And a part of that is through building that initial relationship. The first person who's picking up the call is not the one that's saying yes or no. They're just letting people know that I'm going to gather information, and then somebody's going to get back to you within 24 to 48 hours.
It's too much pressure to have to decide on the fly, yes or no, I can help you or not, or what to do. So the first call is just gathering information.
Right. And so the next call.
Great lesson there, yeah.
So and we want to get a little emotional distance from the problem. And we don't want to be making decisions money-based on just emotion, because everybody's got a huge problem in front of them. So if there is a person, family, or individual that we know that we're not going to be able to engage for whatever reason, we could talk about how we discern some of that and have assessment on that. But the first thing that we always have to make sure our volunteers, and this was primary still volunteers that are engaged in this, that they know their community. So that's a part of my job of just being very aware of what services are in the community. And because we don't want to just mislead people either. We don't want to just give a person a phone number just for the sake of feeling better. Like, okay, just here's a phone number so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And too many people are doing that. And so we don't want that. So that's a big burden of ours, and to keep that list relevant and really listening to the person. And sometimes that no is saying, you know what, we're not best qualified to help you because you're a single male that's homeless. That's not our wheelhouse, but I know Daytona Outreach Center, that's their passion. And so maybe the possible help was, I can get you a bus pass because we have some donated here. So if you come by, get a bus pass, you can go to the other side of town and go check out this ministry that helps single males and homelessness.
Well, that might be another key principle there that we didn't state on you and I. Between us, we kind of know what that is, but just one of the other guiding principles for us is we don't want to give out services in a way that duplicates somebody else's services. So there's plenty of homeless ministries, there's women's shelters, there's food banks, there's those kind of things. And so we feel like, again, how to narrow our focus is by understanding what services are already provided in town. And we're just going to refer people to those because it doesn't make sense for us to try to duplicate them. So then what is it that we are best suited to do that no one else is doing? So sometimes it's not saying no, but it's redirecting. It's like, hey, we don't provide this. We're not suited to this. So let me show you who does, and we'll give you a couple phone numbers. And so there's plenty of times when we're redirecting people and we just become a hub of information, helping people know who can best help them. So, I mean, how often is it in those 180 calls a month, Jeff? It's about directing them to good information.
Absolutely. And I was training somebody today doing what we call this callback. So the first call is done. The next call is our callback team. So as I had this woman on speakerphone, and I'm speaking with her, and the volunteer is shadowing me. She was really upset because her kids were removed from her custody. She didn't even have her kids. And she just heard that Salty Church helps people. And she literally said that. She's like, you guys have the reputation of just helping the community. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that's what you heard. And as we were talking, she just had a lot of frustration, and I allowed her to vent. But the answer still was, I'm like, we're not equipped to, that's not what we're equipped to do. We're trying to keep kids from entering that system. And I'm really sorry that's where your life is right now, your kids. But let me try to see if there's somewhere I can guide you. And she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want that information from me. And that is at the end of the day, it's okay. It's, as long as we're not in a back and forth, we're not in any kind of, tension. She might be very aggravated, but we try to keep our emotions lower, and just offered her prayer. I'm saying at the bare minimum, can I at least pray for you? And she's like, no, I'm good. So, and sometimes that's just the way these calls are going to end. And we have to be okay with that. I think of Jesus after he fed 5,000 people, he wanted them to a deeper than the offering of food. And they were in this back and forth. And at the end of the day, he just let them go because they didn't want what he had to offer. And I think that's where we stand on, is that principle that if Jesus was okay with doing it, we should be okay with it doing it too.
That's great. I'm going to pause here and see if we've got any questions. I know one of them's been answered already. And one is more a comment about just that the empowering and not enabling is huge. So if you've got questions, please type those in for us so that we can get some great insight from these guys. So I'm curious, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, so you get someone that calls in, and do you call your first call triage, or is that just an inside language for you, but trying to discern where do we go with this person? You take a lot of notes.
We call it an intake. Internally, we call it just an intake. Yep.
Okay, so you listen to them, intake, then you got the call back. And so then kind of where does it play out from there? But let's go towards your bread and butter. We've talked about how you're going to try and refer people to where they aren't your bread and butter, but you've got someone with kids, and describe a typical scenario of a parent with kids. What's their composite profile of what they typically are struggling with, and how do you try to help them?
Well, financial burden is always going to be there. That's a given. High volume single moms, that's probably no shocker. And a lot of it, at least in our communities, there's a lot of struggle over housing. Is about to be evicted, living in hotels. Hotel living is huge. So there's a lot of bare basic, well, I should say just a bare basic need of living is stability is probably our biggest issue. So that is kind of the landscape for the most part, but we've had a high number this year, oddly enough, of single dads. Like we've had at least 7, I think, so far this year. And that's rare usually. But what we're gonna do before we get to our bread and butter, and just one thing that you talked about, enablement and empowerment. One of the things, we have an assessment tool that helps us direct traffic, but one of the best things that we learned through helping Hertz, actually, of the difference of how to discern enablement and empowerment. And think of it as like a linear line, a timeline, if you will. On one side, there's enablement, and on the other side, there's empowerment. And the steps in between, closest to enablement, is I don't have a problem. It's just the situation. I'm living in a hotel, but it's really not a problem. I just need money for this hotel room, and they're focused just on the money, or it's not
focused on a surface level. Yeah, absolutely.
Or another piece is a step of that enablement. It's not my fault. It's my landlord's fault. It was a police officer's fault. It was everybody else except for them. There's now, granted, domestic violence issues that pop up, you can't take that as gospel and just always say this always fits. But as you get closer to enablement, there tends to be some fear. To the empowerment, there tends to be a fear about their situation. I don't know what's going to happen if I don't, and I'm really not sure what to do. And ultimately is that surrender. I'll help me. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to take any kind of information that you're willing to give me. So those are kind of how we're filtering. But when they get to Salty Family Services, we provide financial assistance, and it has to be centered around the well-being of a child. And so what that means, it can be directly connected like daycare, but also a little more indirectly through utilities, rent, things like that, just basic home, sometimes food. We don't have a high volume of that, but we're not paying someone's storage unit. Where we typically won't do car insurance. It's every once in a while we might do something like that, but it has to make sense. So it's really directly related to the child. And with that financial assistance, we ask for 2 non-negotiables. And that is, you have to agree to meet with a mentor once a week for 4 weeks. And we go to your home. And we tell them right off the bat, it has nothing to do with church, and it has everything to do with your family. We want to be able to get to know you, to be able to understand how you got in the situation, to be able to encourage you if you feel like you're going through a really difficult time, and it sounds like you're going through a difficult time in most of those situations. We'll offer you prayer. It's up to you on whether you want to accept it or not. And we want to be a connector as well. You have an advocate. You have somebody in your corner that's going to be going, you know what? I saw this job position that posted. And why don't you do you think about applying for it? You got somebody in your corner. The other non-negotiable is within one of those 4 weeks, they have to agree to do a budget with that mentor. And it's a very simple tool, fill in the blank, but oh my God, how much that has been transformative.
Hey, listen, if there's one thing that we can say today for anybody who ever listens to this, the 2 key absolute life-changing elements to our ministry is, number one, we got somebody who's willing to pray for you, and that's important to do. But let me help you with your budget. That budget tool is I mean, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, the number one critical element that is life-changing. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that's not through our own account. That's literally through families' testimonies that we can, talk about later or whatnot. But we've literally heard back from families 4, 5 years later. They still use the same thing that we gave them, that same concept. And it's just really simplistic. And so many people have never been taught and have no idea how to manage money. Like it's really, that's our most reoccurring issue and that we spend the most time with. But I do want to say before we kind of move on, is after the 4 weeks and after the budget's done, their obligation to that financial commitment has been met. They have no obligation to us anymore. But we feel if we've done a good job at the front end of our assessment, and the mentor's done a good job of connecting and not directing, we're not going, this is what you need to do. It's, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Just at least 6 suggestions. Building that relationship, connecting with them, they're going to want to stay connected to us. And if they want to stay connected to us, they can still have that same mentor for the next 2 months, every week, having someone that same person coming out to their home. And now we're starting to shape goals. We're starting to build goals. Sometimes it's, getting that different job. Sometimes it's going back to school and getting their GED, all these things that they never thought they could do before. We're empowering them to have the confidence to move forward. And so they can have a mentor all the way up for 3 months.
All right. Wow. I think everybody that's watching tonight can just envision how even those 2 simple non-negotiables, a mentor and a budget, it can literally be life-changing. And compared to what most of our churches are doing is just trying to figure out what to do with the person on the phone and feeling very confused or have no idea what we should do. And so that in and of itself is huge for us. So where we go from here, we've got a couple of questions. I want to jump in and let you guys kind of gather your thoughts about, with the remaining time, what are some of the things that you really want to teach us as far as what you've learned along the way. Some of these questions here. do you have a good working relationship with mental health agencies in the area? And does the church help with those kind of services if you have to refer them in that direction?
We refer out to those.
Massive issues, mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. We've kept very good relationships with as many organizations as possible. Like, we're always in. A lot of times, people send a large volume of people our way, but we refer people most of the time. If there's somebody who's really struggling with some serious mental health issues, we're not best equipped on the day-to-day in and out of that person's life. We want to connect them to mental health agencies that they can get the best treatment. And because we just don't want our mentors to be in that situation and really not be equipped, honestly.
Yeah. This wasn't a question, but as you were talking, I don't know which one of you would want to address this, but I was just curious, could you tell a story of a mentor couple or family and what being mentors have meant to them after being in the church for a long time and really not having a place of significance? And I just can imagine the first night they go to someone's house, their life is transformed as well.
Yeah, great question. Jeff, give us an example of one of our volunteer mentors. And
absolutely. We've had a number of volunteer mentors through the years now, and this one particular one really set out apart just because she came to us originally. She wasn't coming to our church, but she reached out to us to see if she could do some community service hours, which was crazy because she caught this little petty. She shoplifted something, and so. She got introduced to Salty Church and started doing her volunteer hours there, and then became a part of the church. And as we started to get to know her and her husband, a lot of those concerns that came along with just, even though it was a petty charge, started to dissipate. She really had a firm, a good belief and understanding of who Jesus was in her life, and wanted to do more after some time. And that's one of those things we want to get to know people, especially the mentor position. It's not just anybody can come in, but we want to be able to spend some time, get to know them. We have an interview process, but she's really started to feel like she could give something back to the community. And as a result of her wanting to participate, her husband decided he wanted to participate and give it a try. So they mentored together as a husband and wife team, I think probably for 2.5 years. And they just recently stepped down because they had some family health issues. But it was really, I love that kind of, okay, you came here maybe with your tail between your legs a little bit embarrassed, and then you're empowered to be able to go out in the community and help others that are struggling.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the mentors as far as what capacity do they typically have? What do they get assigned to one family and they're with them until they go to the next one? Or do you have people that are working with 2 or 3 at a time? Or how's that work for us to envision what that would look like in our churches?
So just looking at a volunteer-based mentors, it takes some training. So we invest time into them, and it's shadowing a lot and stuff like that. So we always say you have to be able to be at a point, not necessarily right off the bat, but you have to be able to work with 2 families at a time. And on the average, one family will take about 2 hours of your time in the course of the week, and that's not, that's a half hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour on the long side, just meeting. The other side is the networking side. Some real needy families are maybe 3 hours, but on the average, our mentors have about 2 families a piece. Now we have paid mentors. We've gotten to the point where we've been able to grow and have a couple paid staff. So that's why we're able to handle a lot more volume. But we always have 3, sometimes 4. Last year, 2019, we have 5 volunteer mentors. So that was just 10 families just from a volunteer base. And sometimes those families only go for 4 weeks and they're like, nope, I'm all set and done. Okay, so then we got another one to fill. Sometimes both those families go all the way to 3 months, so it does vary in how much time they spend with one particular family.
Have you guys applied for and received any grants or have you stayed internal the whole way?
We stay away from grants.
Right. That was one
And
question.
mostly just because we just don't want, somebody else dictating, what the outcomes need to be reported on and what we should be focused on. I think we have a pretty good, and Robbie and I have spoken about this plenty of times. There's been plenty of opportunities that popped up, and it's just, we don't want to be serving somebody else to try to, make sure we hit all these benchmarks. That's not our focus.
And to hit on the money
All
for
right.
just a second, I know, like, if you think about the maybe a typical church, let's say 200 people in the church, they don't have a big budget and all that kind of stuff. We started out small. Jeff was a volunteer doing this on the side, and it started out small. We did a fundraiser. What did we raise the first year on that fundraiser? We did a spaghetti dinner. What was that?
9,000.
Okay. It was massive. $9,000 is huge, doing a spaghetti
Absolutely.
dinner to help fund this ministry.
Super
We started
stoked.
out small. And then I think I saw when somebody's
That's good
question,
spaghetti
like,
right
how much
there.
money does Salty Church spend on this ministry? And we're up to, like, was it 75,000 a year or something is what we're spending from our general fund budget. But our actual budget is, what is it, more like
300,000 now.
Yeah. So we get a lot of outside funding from secular people who just love what we do, from businesses who want
Mhm.
to maximize their donations to help. And so the church itself is not funding the bill for this very much comparatively. But as it's grown over the years, Jeff, we're like 350 families a year, give or take.
Yeah, we'll probably be hitting 350. Last year was 325.
Yeah.
Our first year, we had 41. We served 41.
Okay, I was going to ask, so you gone from 40 to 350 in 10 years, has it been?
No, in
No.
6.
6 years. Okay. Yeah, the word gets out, doesn't it?
It
It
does.
does.
There's
180
yeah.
phone calls, 180 phone calls a month. But Jeff, what's the list of organizations that call us?
Oh my
So
goodness.
we have the police department.
Police
calls us.
departments in multiple neighboring towns, the Red Cross, the state attorney's office.
They're
and
calling us for help.
Yeah. And that's,
to me,
that's something that we love to just be in that position.
what I want to make sure we nail down before we leave is that Salty Church is available to any church who wants more information. We will give you everything we have, from our assessment system, our intake, our callback forms, any paperwork that we own, we'll give you if you email us. So anybody who wants anything, just ask, we'll give it all to you. So I want to make sure that's very clear to everybody.
I've said you can take our logo off it and put your own on it. It's fine by us.
Yeah.
And just because we're running out of time, there's one component of Salty Family Services that we didn't hit that I think pastors absolutely have loved is what we call our Call Me When.
Call Me When.
That has been gigantically huge for the church. So just in a quick, real depiction of what that looks like. So once a year, people come into the church, there'll be a 4x6 card on everybody's chair that has Salty Family Services on one side, flip it over, and it says, call me when, and it gives a space for you to write your contact information and then a little bit of space below to write something down. So we tell everybody, you've been given time, talent, treasure to give away. It's not for you to hold on to, it's for you to give away. That Acts 2 kind of approach to ministry. So what do you have that you can put down, and we can put it in our database, organize it so we have our own internal resource list. And so over the years, this has grown and grown. We have over 300 volunteers that we can call from the person, because we don't have a food pantry, that low-lying fruit, I'll provide a gift card for food at Walmart for a family. All right, super. To a mechanic that will fix cars, we just have to buy the parts. To the retired couple that can drive someone to a job interview because the family can't drive. We've even had people offer up. At one point in time, we had 4 families that offered up some form of living space, temporary living space for families that are living in a hotel, that they could get out of the hotel for 4 to 5 weeks while that mentor networked an opportunity in the community.
Yeah, it's how to empower our people to help rescue others. Rescue and empower, that's our game.
Yeah. That way, it's not just a siloed department in your church; it's your whole church being the church, and that's awesome. So I'm curious, one question was, do you provide, I don't know, past the mentoring level with the first month or 3 months, any kind of parenting, marriage, financial skills past those mentoring sessions?
We will provide, say, we've always had pastoral counseling around marriage issues internally. So that would be something that we would be able to pass along to a pastor here.
Mhm.
If there was further budgeting, that's one of those contact me when even. We have people that are like used to be financial advisors that are willing to help out. And so we've had people that are really a little bit more kind of possibly needing to file bankruptcy, in those kind of situations. And we're not going to guide people on that. We're going to connect people to it. And then we've always used for people that have gone past the ability for the budget on a single sheet of paper to different apps like Dave Ramsey or something like that, where people could grasp a more aggressive way in managing their money. So we try to, we partner with counseling centers, at least 2. And so people that are in need of counseling, we'll refer them out to partnerships like that.
Okay, super. Well, our time is up. I think there might be a couple other questions we'll try and answer after the fact. The important thing is for everybody that's live on our session tonight is that you'll receive an automated email tomorrow having joined our webinar. And in that, there's a text box that I'll include the email from Robbie that he described, to where if you have questions or would like to see copies of their intake forms or how they filter and those kind of things, that they'll be able to share some of that with you. That'll be in your follow-up email. So let me shift gears very quickly. Just in the last couple of minutes, I want to tell you 3 things about Waypoint that is coming up soon. Number one is look for that other webinar that we had 9 months ago, creating a benevolence plan for your church. If you're joining us live, Waypoint is hosting the International Conference on Missions in Richmond in 1 month, like from today, 1 month from today. And so we're praying for 800,000. That'd be a big conference. 8,000 people in Richmond that are kingdom-minded, Great Commission people that'll converge on Richmond from around the country. So if you are able to travel and get there, we want to invite you to that. Our next webinar that we have coming up next month is New Realities in On-Site First Impressions. And we used to just say first impressions until during COVID, we realized from this point forward, our first impressions as a church will always be virtual first. And so that's a whole nother webinar that we will do again. We did one about a year ago, but now things have changed because your on-site first impressions are different now than they were pre-COVID, because people know how you preach, they know what your worship looks like because they've seen it online. So how does that shift your first impressions plan on site? So we're going to be talking with some leaders from churches in our region that are really trying to crack that nut. And so we hope that you join us for that, or at least direct the link to this webinar in a month on November 22nd to join us on that evening. I do want to focus on one thing that we've done very recently. Just in the last couple of months, we launched a second monthly podcast for pastors' wives. And it's gotten very good reviews, and it's just to encourage and equip and really resource pastors' wives for the very challenging role they play in their family and in the church. And so you can check that out on our website. If you go to our website, one of the tabs at the top says podcast, and you can subscribe to that, along with our other one that's been going for almost a year now, that Becca Hott and Dyke McCord on our staff do every other week with church leadership in mind, with leaders from around the Waypoint region that are serving well, and we've got lessons to learn from them. And so that's where we're at. I always want to give props to Mid-Atlantic Christian University, our sponsor, that allows us to have this platform. But tonight I want to say thanks to these guys and for what they're doing through their church, in their community. And I think every person that will watch this webinar can appreciate just the great position that you're in, to have the reputation of we heard you help people. And for the church to have that place in their community, rather than, Jeff, like you talked about, to be the church that is irrelevant. And why would we ever involve the church? Because they're just as bad or worse than us. It's like, but for you to be getting the calls, and it was a couple, you and your wife, saying we can do something here, and it grew from there. And any church, whether they're 60 or 160 or 600, can start a ministry that says we're going to make a proactive impact by empowering people to move forward in their lives. That's so great. So thanks for joining us tonight, and for what you're doing, and for your open-handedness to help other churches do the same. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a good evening. And we hope to see those that are on the webinar tonight. We hope to see you next month or at ICOM. Have a great evening.